Jake Paul just had a new press conference with Mike Tyson on August 18th, gearing up for their highly anticipated fight in November. But things took an unexpected turn when Joe Rogan stepped in and completely humiliated Jake after the event. Yes, you heard that right. Joe Rogan didn't just embarrass the problem child, he pointed out how Jake pretty much set himself up for it. During the press conference, Jake made some seriously bold claims, even going as far as to compare himself to legends like Muhammad Ali. He stirred the pot even more by taking shots at Tyson's age and past struggles with mental health. But Jake's over-the-top arrogance was a double-edged sword. He practically begged to be taken down a peg, and Rogan didn't hold back. Rogan called out Jake's delusions, saying, "Jake, you're no Ali, and you're definitely not ready for Tyson. You're just a loudmouth who's about to get a reality check." Let's break it down. Joe Rogan gave Jake Paul the reality check he desperately needed after that freak show of a press conference. All of New York City was cracking up at Jake's ridiculous antics. It was clear that Jake wasn't just out of pocket, he was completely delusional. He turned what should have been a serious event into a circus, leaving everyone wondering if he even understands what he's getting into with Mike Tyson. This is a fight against the baddest man on the planet, but the YouTuber turned boxer has been treating it like a walk in the park. But before we get into the wild stuff, Jake said, let's first talk about Rogan's explosive reaction after the press conference. People were dying for the UFC commentator to respond. You know, Rogan, he's never one to shy away from giving his honest opinion, especially when it comes to combat sports. And boy, did he deliver. Plus, he's pretty much the voice of the entire boxing and MMA world, so fight fans don't take his words lightly. In a new episode of his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience Rogan didn't hold back. He didn't just clap back at Jake Paul, he straight up humbled him. Rogan said, "Look, I get it, Jake's trying to sell the fight, that's what these press conferences are for. But let's not kid ourselves here. He's about to step into the ring with one of the most dangerous men to ever put on gloves. This is Mike freaking Tyson we're talking about. Jake Paul is gearing up for what might be the biggest fight of his career, a showdown with none other than the legendary Mike Tyson. I mean, come on, this is a huge step up for Jake. Tyson's a living legend, and even though he's past his prime, the idea of fighting Mike Tyson would make any normal person think twice. But Jake, in typical Jake Paul fashion, walked into the press conference with his chest puffed out, full of confidence, and let's be honest, a lot of trash talk. He came out swinging with verbal jabs, not only at Tyson, but also taking shots at critics, particularly Joe Rogan. Jake was acting like this was just another influencer boxing event. He tried to downplay Tyson's legacy, saying things like, "Yeah, Mike was great in his time, but I'm the future of boxing. I'm the one bringing in the real money and viewers." He even went as far as to say that Rogan, who's been critical of Jake's boxing journey, doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just a podcaster who's out of touch with today's boxing, Jake claimed. From the moment Jake Paul stepped on that stage, the crowd just wasn't having it. The boos were deafening, and you could see Jake starting to freak out, desperately trying to get things under control. He was screaming into the mic, blurting out whatever came to mind, but nothing was working. And then, as if things couldn't get any worse, Jake went and crossed all limits. The problem child took things to a whole new level of crazy by comparing himself to Muhammad Ali. Yep, you heard that right. At that moment, the crowd was completely over him because there's nothing about the former Disney star that even remotely screams boxing legend. The whole arena knew it, and they made sure Jake felt every bit of it. Joe Rogan's reaction to Jake calling himself the Muhammad Ali of this era was absolutely priceless. The UFC commentator couldn't help but laugh at Jake's wild claims, especially considering Jake's recent performance. Remember Jake's last fight on July 20th in Tampa, Florida, where he faced Mike Perry? Jake scored a 6th-round co-win, and ever since, he's been strutting around like he's the king of the world. But Rogan's not buying any of Jake's self-praise. He pointed out that Mike Perry is a far cry from the legends Muhammad Ali fought guys like Sonny Liston, George Foreman, and Joe Frazier, who defined an era. Comparing himself to Ali after beating Perry is like calling yourself a superhero after taking down a local street thug. Rogan made it clear Jake's not even close to being in the same league. Hear me out. Jake's had some success, but going up against Mike Tyson is a whole different ballgame. Tyson might not be the same fighter he was in his prime, but let's not forget, this is the guy who used to knock people out in under a minute. Jake was talking like this was just another day at the office, but you could tell some people in the room were looking at him like, "Dude, are you serious right now?" Jake Paul's lack of respect for Mike Tyson at the press conference was downright shocking. Sure, press conferences are about hyping up the fight and throwing some trash talk around. But when you're facing a legend like Tyson, you need to show some level of respect. Jake, however, stooped as low as he could, treating Tyson like he was just another one of his usual YouTube opponents. Now, let's really break this down. Joe Rogan's point about Jake Paul fighting Mike Tyson isn't just about two guys stepping into a ring, it's about legacy versus hype. Jake Paul's whole boxing career has been built around big talk and big numbers. But let's be honest, most of Jake's opponents haven't been actual boxers. He's fought retired MMA fighters and a basketball player, and while he's won, those victories don't carry the same weight as going toe-to-toe with a legitimate boxer. That's what makes this fight with Mike Tyson so intriguing and so dangerous for Jake. Tyson's legacy speaks for itself. He's a former heavyweight champion who was once the most feared man in the sport. Even in his 50s, Tyson's power and skill are nothing to laugh at. Just look at his recent exhibition fight with Roy Jones Jr. Tyson might not be in his prime anymore, but he's still a force to be reckoned with. Joe Rogan made it clear, this isn't a game for Tyson. He's not coming to play around or put on a show for the cameras. Tyson's mindset is still that of a warrior, and when the fight starts, Jake is going to have to deal with a level of intensity and experience that he's never faced before. Rogan summed it up best when he said, Jake Paul is about to learn what real boxing is, and if he's not ready for that, it's going to be a short night for him. So what does all this mean for Jake Paul? He's been riding high on his success in the influencer boxing world, but now he's facing a true test against one of the most legendary fighters of all time. Joe Rogan's critique wasn't just about Jake's trash talk, it was a reality check. Jake has built a massive following by being brash, bold, and unapologetic, but against Tyson, none of that matters. Tyson doesn't care about social media followers, pay-per-view buys, or YouTube views. All he cares about is what happens in the ring, and that's where Jake is going to have to prove himself. The big question is, can Jake Paul actually handle Mike Tyson in the ring? Tyson's not the same fighter he was in his prime, but he's still dangerous. If Jake is underestimating him or relying too much on his confidence, he could be in for a rude awakening. Joe's words might have stung, but they were the truth. Jake's about to face a man who's fought the best of the best, and this fight is going to show whether Jake Paul is really cut out for the big leagues or if he's just been riding the wave of hype. This press conference and Joe Rogan's verbal smackdown were a serious wake-up call for Jake Paul. For someone who's used to playing the role of the big shot on social media, this was a major reality check. It's one thing to dominate YouTube and social media, but it's another to face the tough reality of the boxing world. We'll have to wait and